To the generation just grown to manhood, the Guards, swinging ceremoniously down the Mall, connoted the British Army. These matchless troops were almost the only reminder that this nation still had its military service. Between the decades of disarmament and the Great War remained the visible links of trooping the color and the full-dress uniform, and the magic name of the Guards. The long trail of 1914 to 18 added further renown not only to the Guards, it established the whole British Army as a fighting force beyond compare. Imbued with the spirit of crusaders, civilian soldiers vied with the regulars in discipline and bulldog tenacity of the first-class soldier. In the hope that the last attack had swept militarism from the earth, the Allied armies made peace. London acclaimed as heroes the men who came back from the war to end war. For years, an exampled effort at home and in the field had left the nation with one predominant desire: to live henceforth in peace. Perhaps no one who marched or cheered that day dreamed that 20 years later militarism would be rampant again. At Versailles, Lloyd George, Clemenceau, and the rest drafted the Treaty of Peace, believing that in that hall of mirrors they were inaugurating the new era of world peace. And in the decades of peace that followed, the high spot of the military year was the Aldershot Tattoo. This brilliant spectacle, annually witnessed by thousands on Rushmore Arena, was staged solely to benefit military charities. Of cloth of gold was typical of the ambitious pageants performed in the Aldershot Tattoo. Often when Britain has dwelt admiringly on her illustrious past, she has renewed her glory. While Shakespeare lauded the kings whose deeds were history, Drake and his followers swept the Armada from the seas. So in this age came an awakening. The lion was rising from his too long sleep. At the Ministry of War, a new spirit was evident. An inspired appointment brought Viscount Gort, VC in the last war, to the highest peacetime post in the army. With his chief, Lord Gort planned a recruiting drive. As Britain still clung to the voluntary system, the Central Recruiting Office used high-pressure publicity to attract the right type of men in the right numbers. After a few weeks with the colors, the recruits made excellent soldiers.
When the command called fall, I want the even numbers to take a pace to the rear with the left foot and a side pace to the right with the right foot.
Super examples of intensive training are the Marines. After only 2 months in uniform, these men already move with a precision which 10 years on the square could hardly improve. Such exercises give fighting men that instant, instinctive, unquestioning obedience to orders which makes panic impossible. Sandhurst, under the new military regime, opened its gates to all. This training ground of future officers could now be entered from the lower ranks. Men already serving in the army who could pass the examination were now admitted.
Shoulders back.
Off parade, Sandhurst cadets wear their own distinctive off-duty dress. Their pillbox caps reminiscent of old photographs of the Victorian volunteers. Cycles are a necessary time saver, where parade ground and lecture rooms are quite a distance apart. Only 2 regular cavalry regiments, apart from the household troops, had retained their horses until some months before the war. It was left to them to uphold the traditions of the incomparable mounted regiments, once the major part of the army. Not saddle to saddle, but in the safer open formation, they nowadays practice the charge. Whether cavalry will or will not play much part in the present war, the real horse lover will welcome the change to mechanization. It spares animals in thousands the fate of adding their blood and entrails to the general carnage. So the nose bag gives place to the petrol tank. Not horses' hoofs, but tank tracks will pound the battlefields. The well-trained horseman is displaced by the lorry driver. And in the headlong charge upon the enemy position, tanks and not cavalry now lead the way. Compulsory service, as the war came nearer, drew into the army the first 30,000 militiamen. Despite intensive recruiting, the voluntary system was not enough. Under it, regulars and territorials combined numbered only 500,000, and of that number more than 100,000 were garrisoned abroad. To rescue Britain from the dangerous position of having far and away the smallest army among the powers of Europe, the Military Training Act was passed, only just in time. Content at first to call comparatively few men to the colors, this compulsory scheme switched on the machinery by which a vast army could be rapidly created. General Dill inspected men of the first batch. Compulsory service draws on all classes of the country. MPs were invited to see the new army equipment. Battle dress dispenses with polished buttons and puttees. The infantryman's large pouches hold ammunition for a Benn gun. Pneumatic spades make light of digging reserve line trenches. The new bayonet is barely half the length of the old type, much more easily fixed and carried. On a tripod, the Bren gun can be turned against aircraft. The new anti-tank rifle and that marvel of mobility, the anti-tank gun, as well as the latest radio equipment of the infantry, were demonstrated for the MP's benefit. In the manufacture of ammunition, great strides have been made in the last few years. Too high a percentage of the millions of shells fired in the Great War missed their target through minute inaccuracies of weight and size, or because of below standard propellant charges. In this war, the instruments will be worthy of the men. All shells of a given caliber must weigh exactly the same if they're to pitch dead on the objective. The copper driving band is all important. Cut by the rifling of the gun barrel, it spins the shell to hold it straight in the air. Britain has all the raw materials and all the skilled workers to keep the guns well supplied. On the home front, immeasurably improved anti-aircraft guns employ the latest aids of science. Range finding is no longer haphazard. When found, it is called to the crew on the predictor, a miraculous instrument which estimates the speed of the air raider and where he will be in the split seconds when the shell fired at him will burst. By electrical connection, the predictor then trains the guns onto the target, with unpleasant consequences to any enemy flying within the 30,000-foot range of the 3.7. Queen Bee, a radio-controlled target plane, has many times been brought down by such anti-aircraft fire. In the days of horse artillery, gunners in open warfare rode into action. Mechanized equipment has robbed these operations of much of their spectacle. A new development of science, television, may minimize their danger. In the line ahead of the guns, artillery must have an observation post to check the accuracy of the firing. For the officer and his telephonist, this is the most dangerous work in the battery, and alarming numbers of officers are hit. Before the war, the artillery was experimenting with television. An unattended camera at the observation post would send to the battery receiving set far more accurate reports than could come through the field telephone of the officer. The battery commander would actually see the results of his fire. Few people of this generation have any conception of modern battle waged with all the resources that science can now bring to the art of war. More even than the machines, the men behind them excite our admiration. Men who know their machines and operate them rapidly, yet almost with the calm precision of troop movements on a barrack square. No more striking impression of war has ever been given than was provided by a demonstration in which guns, tanks, and infantry took part. A complete attack was simulated as 0 hour struck.
Fire!
On that historic Sunday when the Premier announced from 10 Downing Street that all peace efforts had failed, the army put on its dress of battle. In their homes, the people listened to Mr. Chamberlain's fateful words.
This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us.
Reservists and territorials were rapidly mobilized. Upon this war, which every compromise and concession had failed to avert, all ranks of the army embarked with quiet determination to win. Completely absent were the jubilation, mob hysteria, jingoism of August 1914. All but the youngest soldiers remembered at least something of the last war. When the first drafts were ordered to France, they marched lightheartedly, yet appreciating that no picnic awaited them on the other side. Every man among them knew the cause for which he was going to fight, knew that only by fighting could any tolerable future life be won. Lord Gort, the new commander-in-chief, and Sir Edmund Ironside, the chief of the General Staff, direct the campaign abroad. And in the early part of his reign, King George sees his armies cross the Channel. The Tommy Atkins who made a butt of the Kaiser 25 years ago today turns his unfailing humor on another subject. Like his predecessors of 1914, he embarks with a song, one that is destined perhaps to be the Tipperary of the present war.
We're counting over, we've given our place to love. The Army, the Navy are ready to make the show. And of course there's the Air Force will hit to help the boat. We're counting over, you indicate the fight. We are out to show the world that we are right. Remember, the troops on every side. We're counting over, there's nothing to stop us now.
So, for the second time within one generation, Britain sends the flower of her youth to fight aggression. No great power on earth is normally less warlike than the British. But when honor is violated and freedom jeopardized, then does Great Britain let loose the dogs of war, imitate the action of the tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood. As these men embark, we who are left behind resolve to leave nothing undone to aid them in the coming fight. Please God, the day will be not far distant when they will return victorious in the just crusade for right.